The Galactic Council had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. 700 different species had joined together under one promise. They would not attack each other. They would trade, they would talk, and they would keep the peace. For most of those 12,000 years, the system had worked. Humanity had joined the Council only 40 years ago. In the eyes of the elder races, humans were bobbies. They were new. They were small. They did not understand how things worked in the galaxy. The older species looked at humanity the way a grown man looks at a child playing with toys. Admiral Grace Holland did not feel like a child. She stood in the great white chamber of the council station, her uniform pressed and perfect, her back straight as steel. She was 52 years old and had spent 30 years in service to Earth. She had fought pirates in the asteroid belts. She had negotiated treaties with species that did not breathe oxygen. She had buried friends and enemies alike. Today, she was here as a diplomat. General stood to her left. Was the finest tactical mind humanity had ever produced. She could look at a battlefield and see patterns that others missed. She had won 17 engagements without losing a single ship, a record that no other human commander had matched. Commodore stood to her right, was a pilot before she was a commander. She had flown everything from small fighters to massive carriers. There was a saying in the fleet that could make a brick fly if you gave her enough fuel. The three women had been chosen carefully for this mission. The dispute was simple. A group of human colonies in the expanse had been claimed by the collective. The humans had settled on their territory. The humans said they had arrived first. It was the kind of argument that happened all the time in a galaxy full of expanding civilizations. Grace expected a long negotiation. She expected compromise. She expected to go home tired but successful. She did not expect what happened next. The High Speaker entered the chamber surrounded by guards. He was tall, almost 3 meters, with a body covered in hard brown shell. His head was like an insect's, with large compound eyes that reflected the light in strange ways. His mouth was a collection of moving parts that clicked and clattered when he spoke. The translator implant in Grace's ear turned those clicks into words. "You are the human delegation," the High Speaker said. It was not a question. "We are," Grace replied. "We are honored to meet with you, High Speaker. We hope to find a solution that benefits both our peoples." The High Speaker made a sound that might have been laughter. "There is nothing to find. The solution has already been decided." Grace felt the first hint of unease. She had read the briefing documents. She had studied culture and politics. Nothing had prepared her for the contempt in the High Speaker's voice. "Perhaps we should discuss the details," she said carefully. "Our colonies have 3 million civilians. We cannot simply abandon them." "You misunderstand." The High Speaker moved closer and his guards moved with him. "This is not a discussion. This is an order. You will remove your people from the expanse. You will pay compensation for the resources you have taken. You will accept whatever punishment the Council decides." Stepped forward, her eyes hard. "With respect, High Speaker, humanity does not take orders. We came here to negotiate in good faith." "Good faith?" The High Speaker clicked his mandibles in what seemed like amusement. "Your species knows nothing of faith, good or otherwise. You are children. You are newcomers. You do not understand your place in this galaxy." Spoke up, her voice calm but firm. "Our place is wherever we choose to stand. That is what it means to be human." The chamber fell silent. The other council representatives, species from a dozen different worlds, watched with expressions that ranged from curiosity to fear. Grace noticed that none of them seemed surprised by the High Speaker's behavior. None of them spoke up in humanity's defense. That was when she understood. This was not a negotiation. It had never been a negotiation. The Council had already decided what would happen. The humans had been brought here not to talk, but to be told. "High Speaker," Grace said slowly, "I am beginning to think that this meeting was arranged under false pretenses." "You are beginning to think correctly," the High Speaker replied. "Your species has grown too quickly. You expand too fast. You adapt too well. The elder races have watched you and they are concerned." "Concerned about what? We have followed every rule. We have honored every treaty." "You have, and that is the problem." The High Speaker leaned closer, his compound eyes reflecting Grace's face in 100 tiny images. "A species that follows the rules while it is weak will break them when it is strong. We have seen this pattern before. We will not allow it to happen again." Grace felt cold. "What exactly are you saying?" "I am saying that humanity must be reminded of its place. You must learn to fear us. You must learn to obey." The High Speaker straightened. "And you three will serve as the lesson." Grace reached for her communicator, but she was too slow. She saw the High Speaker raise one clawed hand, saw him give a signal to the guards that surrounded the chamber. She heard shout a warning. She heard reach for a sidearm that she had been forbidden to carry. Then the plasma bolts came. Fell first, a burning hole in her chest where her heart used to be. Her body hit the white floor and did not move. Spun from the impact, 3 shots catching her in the side as she tried to shield Grace. She collapsed without a sound. Grace felt the first bolt hit her shoulder. The second took her in the stomach. The third burned through her leg. She fell to her knees, blood spreading across the white floor. The pain was enormous, but her mind was strangely clear. She looked up at the High Speaker, at his compound eyes that showed no emotion, at his mandibles that clicked in satisfaction. With her last strength, she activated her communicator. The signal would reach Earth in 14 minutes, carrying a single word across the vast darkness of space. "Betrayed." Then she fell forward and did not move again. The High Speaker looked down at the 3 human bodies. "Clean this up," he ordered, "and prepare a statement for the human government. Tell them their diplomats were killed in a regrettable security incident. Tell them they have 72 hours to accept our terms or face the consequences." He turned and walked away, confident that he had solved the human problem. He had studied humanity's history, their wars, and their conflicts. He believed that removing their leaders would cause chaos and division. He believed that humans would fight among themselves, as they always had. He had studied the wrong parts of human history. He did not know about the old man in Montana, who would receive a phone call in 14 minutes. He did not know about the ghost fleet hidden in the darkness beyond Neptune. He did not know that humans had a name for the thing that monsters feared. He did not know about the Baba. But he would learn. They all would. The house sat at the end of a dirt road in rural Montana, surrounded by fields and forests and silence. It was a simple house, built with wood and stone, with a porch that faced the mountains and a garden that grew tomatoes and beans and peppers. Colonel Samuel Price, retired, was on his knees in the dirt when the news reached Earth. He was 73 years old, with white hair that had once been black and hands that shook slightly when he was tired. His neighbors in the small town 15 miles away knew him as a quiet man who kept to himself. He came into town once a week to buy groceries. He nodded politely to people, but rarely spoke more than a few words. He walked with a slight limp that he never explained. The children in town thought he was boring. The adults thought he was lonely. Nobody thought he was dangerous. They were wrong. Samuel had served his country and his species for 40 years. He had fought in wars that were never reported, in places that did not officially exist, against enemies that were never named. He had done things that would never appear in any history book, things that had saved millions of lives, things that still woke him in the night with sweat on his skin and screams in his throat. The intelligence community had given him many names over the years: Ghost, Phantom, the man who was not there. But there was one name that stuck, one name that was whispered in classified briefings and written in files that would never be. Baba. The boogeyman, the thing that evil men saw in their nightmares, the darkness that came for those who thought themselves beyond justice. He had retired 15 years ago, after an operation that had pushed him to his limits and beyond. The government had been glad to let him disappear. He was a weapon too dangerous to use, but too valuable to destroy. So they let him plant his garden and tend his tomatoes and pretend to be an ordinary old man. The secure phone was in a locked drawer in his bedroom. He checked it once a month, more out of habit than expectation. It had not rung in over a decade. When it rang that afternoon, Samuel was washing dirt from his hands at the kitchen sink. He heard the tone, muffled through two closed doors, and he stopped moving. For a long moment he simply stood there, water running over his fingers, his eyes fixed on nothing. Then he dried his hands and walked to the bedroom. "This is Price," he said when he answered. "Colonel." The voice belonged to Blake, the Secretary of Defense. Samuel had known for 30 years, since they were both young men with more courage than sense. "I assume you have seen the news." "I have not seen the news. I was in my garden." There was a pause. "Turn on your screen. Channel does not matter. It is on every channel." Samuel walked to the living room and activated the old display screen he rarely used. The image that appeared showed 3 bodies on a white floor, surrounded by alien guards. The headline at the bottom of the screen read, "Human Diplomats killed at Galactic Council Summit." He recognized the faces. Grace Holland had been his student 20 years ago. He had trained her himself, taught her everything he knew about strategy and leadership and the terrible mathematics of war. She had been brilliant. She had been brave. She had been like a daughter to him. Had served under him during the Titan crisis. She had a mind like a computer, able to process information faster than anyone Samuel had ever met. He had recommended her for promotion 6 times. Had been a pilot in his squadron during the Belt conflicts. She had saved his life twice, flying through fields of debris and enemy fire to pull him out of situations that should have been fatal. They were dead, all 3 of them, murdered under a flag of truce. "The Council is calling it a security incident," said. "They are demanding we accept their terms within 72 hours. They want us to withdraw from the colonies and pay compensation." Samuel said nothing. "The President is considering options. The military wants to respond, but we are. The Council has thousands of warships. We have maybe 200 that could fight." Samuel still said nothing. "Colonel, I need to know what you are thinking." When Samuel finally spoke, his voice had changed. It was colder now, harder, like metal cooled in winter. "Do you remember what I told you when I retired? You said you hoped you would never have to work again." "I also said something else." Was quiet for a moment. "You said that if anyone ever made it necessary, you would remind the galaxy why humans learned to fear the dark. Grace was like my daughter, was my student, saved my life." Samuel looked at the screen, at the 3 bodies lying in their own blood. "Someone is going to pay for this. Someone is going to pay in ways that will be remembered for 1,000 years. What do you need?" "Everything. Every asset, every resource, every secret we have. I need full authority to do whatever I decide is necessary. The President will need to approve that. Then get his approval and tell him something else." "What?" "Tell him the Baba is coming out of retirement. Tell him that when I am done, the Galactic Council will understand exactly what kind of mistake they made. Tell him that there will not be enough left of them to bury." There was a long silence on the line. When spoke again, his voice was careful. "Samuel, are you sure about this? You retired for a reason. You said you were done with that life." Samuel looked out the window at his garden, at the tomatoes that were almost ready for harvest, at the peaceful mountains in the distance. He thought about Grace, about her smile, about the day she had graduated from the academy and told him she wanted to be just like him. "I was done," he said. "They pulled me back, and now they are going to learn why that was a mistake. He ended the call and stood alone in the quiet house. Outside, the sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of red and orange. It was beautiful. It was peaceful. Samuel Price looked at that sunset and felt nothing but cold purpose settling into his bones. Somewhere in the galaxy, the beings who had ordered the deaths of 3 good women were celebrating their victory. They thought they had taught humanity a lesson. They thought they had shown the young species its place. They had no idea what was coming. The boogeyman was awake. The monster that monsters feared was putting on his uniform for the last time. The Baba was going to war. And this time, he was not going to stop until the galaxy understood that there were worse things in the darkness than the void between stars. The asteroid was unremarkable. It floated in the darkness beyond Neptune, one of millions of rocks drifting through the cold emptiness at the edge of human space. No alien sensor had ever scanned it. No council patrol had ever come within 1 billion kilometers of it. That was exactly the point. Samuel Price arrived at the hidden station 3 days after the call from the Secretary of Defense. His shuttle docked at an entrance carved into the asteroid's surface, invisible to any observer more than a few hundred meters away. The hangar inside was vast, carved from solid rock and reinforced with materials that did not appear on any official inventory. He stepped off the shuttle and took a deep breath of recycled air. It smelled like metal and engine oil and old secrets. This was Contingency Station Alpha. This was the place that did not exist. When humanity had joined the Galactic Council 40 years ago, the leaders of Earth had smiled and signed treaties and promised to be good neighbors. They had dismantled weapons that violated Council regulations. They had limited their fleet to approved sizes. They had done everything the elder races demanded. In public, in private, they had prepared for the worst. The contingency protocol had been born from a simple understanding. The galaxy was not kind to the weak. The Council preached peace, but the elder races had not survived for thousands of years by trusting newcomers. Humanity would smile and cooperate and follow the rules, but they would also build a second fleet in absolute secrecy. A fleet that could fight if the smiles ever stopped working. The Ghost Fleet waited in the darkness. 72 warships, painted black, running silent, carrying weapons that violated 17 different Council treaties. They had crews that had trained for years in isolation, men and women who had given up normal lives to prepare for a day that might never come. That day had come. Captain Diana Marsh met Samuel at the entrance to the command center. She was 42 years old, with short brown hair and eyes that had seen combat. She had commanded the Ghost Fleet for 5 years, waiting in the darkness for orders that part of her had hoped would never arrive. "Colonel Price," she saluted sharply, "we have been expecting you." "At ease, Captain." Samuel looked around the corridor at the young officers who stopped to stare at him as he passed. "I see my reputation has preceded me." "Stories about you are taught at the academy, sir. Most of the crew thought you were dead." "I was retired. There is a difference." He fell into step beside her as they walked toward the command center. "Give me the status report." "All 72 ships are operational. Crews are at full strength. Weapons systems have been tested and we can launch within 6 hours of receiving orders." "Good. What about intelligence?" "We have been monitoring Council communications since the incident. They believe their plan worked. The High Speaker is being praised as a hero for putting humanity in its place. The other ruling powers are discussing how to divide up our colonies." Samuel nodded slowly. His face showed no emotion, but his eyes were hard as stone. "They think it is over." "Yes, sir. They have no idea we exist." They entered the command center, a vast room filled with holographic displays and control stations. Officers looked up from their work as Samuel walked in. The room fell silent. Samuel stood in the center and looked around at the faces watching him. These people had given up years of their lives for this moment. They had trained in secret, lived in isolation, prepared for a war that might never happen. Now it was happening, and they were looking to him for guidance. "I am not going to give you a speech," he said. "You know what happened. 3 of our people were murdered under a flag of truce. The council believes we are weak. They believe we will accept this insult and move on." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "They are wrong. We are going to show them exactly how wrong they are. But we are not going to do it through blind destruction. We are not going to kill civilians. We are not going to burn worlds. We are going to be surgical. We are going to be precise. We are going to dismantle their power structure piece by piece until they understand that humanity is not to be threatened." He gestured, and the main display flickered to life. It showed a map of the galaxy, with Council space highlighted in blue and human territory in green. The Council has 700 member species, but only 12 hold real power. These are the ruling races, the ones who make decisions, the ones who ordered the execution of our officers. He highlighted 12 star systems on the map. "We are going to visit each of them, one by one, and we are going to teach them a lesson they will never forget." Captain Marsh stepped forward. "What exactly is the plan, sir?" "They are the current leaders of the Council. Their High Speaker gave the order to kill our people. We start with them." Samuel zoomed in on a star system near the center of Council space. "There is called Prime, 8 billion inhabitants, the largest military installation in Council territory. They believe it is invincible. And our objective? We are going to prove them wrong. We will disable their defenses, destroy their military assets, and force their government to surrender. We will not harm civilians, but we will leave no doubt about our capabilities." Samuel looked around the room. "When we are done with we move to the next ruling race. Then the next. Then the next, until all 12 have learned what happens when you betray humanity." A young officer raised her hand. "Sir, the Council outnumbers us 100 to 1. Even with surprise on our side, how can we possibly win?" Samuel smiled, and there was nothing warm in it. "They have numbers. We have something better. We have 40,000 years of evolution that taught us to be the most dangerous predators on our planet. We have a history of warfare that makes the Council look like children playing games. We have weapons they have never seen, tactics they cannot predict, and a rage that will not be satisfied until justice is done." He looked at the young officer directly. "They have not fought a real war in 600 years. Their ships are designed for show, not for combat. Their crews have never faced an enemy that wanted to kill them. We have. We are human. War is what we do." The room was silent. Samuel could feel the energy building, the fear transforming into determination, the doubt becoming resolve. "Prepare the fleet," he ordered. "We launch in 4 hours, and when we are done, the galaxy will remember this day as the moment they learned to fear the dark." Captain Marsh saluted. "Yes, sir." The command center erupted into activity. Officers ran to their stations. Communications channels filled with orders and confirmations. The Ghost Fleet began to wake from its long sleep. In the darkness beyond Neptune, 72 black ships powered up their engines and prepared for war. The Baba was coming, and the galaxy was not ready. Prime was a world of endless jungles. Thick green vegetation covered every continent, broken only by rivers that wound through the trees like silver ribbons. They had built their civilization in harmony with this jungle, their cities rising from the forest floor like giant termite mounds, structures of and metal that housed billions of inhabitants. The capital city was called. It sprawled across 1,000 square kilometers, home to 8 billion who had never known war on their own soil. Their ancestors had conquered their enemies long ago. Their children had grown up believing that they were invincible. They were about to learn otherwise. The Ghost Fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at midnight local time. One moment the skies above Prime were empty. The next moment, 72 black ships hung in the darkness like vengeful spirits, their hulls absorbing light rather than reflecting it. The planetary defense grid detected them immediately. Alarms screamed across the capital. Military commanders scrambled to their stations. The High Speaker was woken from his sleep and rushed to a secure bunker deep beneath the palace. It did not matter. Before they could activate their weapons, the Ghost Fleet struck. Surgical strikes, precise and devastating, hit every military installation on the planet. Missile batteries exploded before they could fire. Shield generators went dark. Communications towers fell silent. In 90 seconds, the most powerful military force in Council space was blind, deaf, and defenseless. Then Samuel broadcast his message. "This is Colonel Samuel Price of the United Earth Defense Force." His voice echoed from every speaker, every screen, every communication device on the planet. "3 days ago, your council murdered 3 of our officers under a flag of truce. We have come to collect a debt." In his bunker, the High Speaker listened to the human voice with growing disbelief. This was impossible. Humans did not have this kind of technology. Humans did not have the courage for this kind of attack. The intelligence reports had been clear. Humanity was weak, divided, easily frightened. The intelligence reports had been wrong. Samuel continued his broadcast. "We are not here to kill your civilians. We are not here to destroy your world. We are here to demonstrate the consequences of betraying humanity. Watch carefully. Learn well. Remember this night." The Ghost Fleet moved with terrible precision. Ground forces landed outside the capital, securing key positions without firing a shot at civilian targets. Military units that tried to resist were neutralized with overwhelming force. Those that surrendered were treated according to the laws of war. The High Speaker's palace was the primary target. Samuel led the assault team himself. He moved through the corridors of the ancient building like a ghost, his weapon never rising, his boots silent on the polished floors. Guards who tried to stop him were disabled with non-lethal force. He did not kill unless he had to. He found the entrance to the bunker and overrode the security locks with equipment that the council did not know humans possessed. The heavy doors slid open, revealing a chamber full of terrified officials and their guards. The High Speaker stood at the center of the room, his compound eyes wide with fear. He had never seen a human in person before the diplomatic summit. He had thought them small, soft, insignificant. The human standing before him now was none of those things. Samuel walked into the bunker alone, his weapon holstered, his hands visible at his sides. He looked at the guards, at the officials, at the High Speaker who had ordered the deaths of 3 good women. "You could kill me right now," he said calmly. "It would change nothing. My people know what you did, and we do not forget." The High Speaker clicked his mandibles, trying to maintain some dignity. "You cannot do this. The Council will unite against you. You will be destroyed." The Council is a collection of species who have forgotten what it means to fight for survival. Samuel took a step closer. "Humanity has not forgotten. We spent our entire history fighting each other. We perfected the art of war over thousands of years. Now we have turned that experience outward." He paused. "You should be grateful." Grateful, the word came out as a hiss of disbelief. "We could have destroyed your planet from orbit. We could have killed every on Prime. We chose not to." Samuel met the High Speaker's compound eyes without flinching. "Remember that mercy when you speak of humans in the future." The surrender was signed within the hour. From Prime, the Ghost Fleet moved to the next target. The Dominion had ruled their sector of space for 3,000 years. They were warriors, proud and fierce, and they refused to surrender. Their navy met the Ghost Fleet in open space. The battle lasted 17 minutes. Samuel had studied tactics for years. He knew how they fought, how they thought, how they would react to every move he made. They knew nothing about human warfare. They charged straight into traps that a human child would have recognized. They exposed their flanks. They broke formation when pressured. They died by the thousands. When it was over, the ambassador contacted Samuel directly. The warrior species surrendered with what remained of their honor, acknowledging that they had been defeated by a superior force. The consortium was next. They were traders, not fighters, and they understood the mathematics of the situation immediately. When the Ghost Fleet appeared in their system, they surrendered before a single shot was fired. One by one, the 12 ruling powers fell. Some fought, some negotiated, some simply accepted the inevitable. Each time, Samuel delivered the same message. Humanity had come in peace, humanity had been betrayed, humanity would not be betrayed again. The galaxy watched in disbelief. For 12,000 years, the Council had maintained peace through the threat of overwhelming force. The elder races had believed themselves safe from challenge. They had grown comfortable, complacent, lazy. They had forgotten that peace without justice was merely silence before the storm. Samuel reminded them. On world after world, he dismantled the symbols of power that the ruling races had built. Palaces were occupied. Fleets were captured or destroyed. Council records were seized and released to the public, showing the corruption and cruelty that had been hidden for centuries. But Samuel never touched civilians. He never bombed cities. He never destroyed infrastructure that ordinary people needed to survive. His war was against the powerful, not the powerless. His vengeance was precise. 6 months after the executions at the council chamber, the 12 ruling powers had been broken. Their fleets were gone. Their governments had been replaced. Their grip on the galaxy had been shattered. And in the ruins of the old order, something new was being born. The surviving council members agreed to Samuel's terms. A new assembly would be formed, one where every species had equal representation. The days of the elder races ruling over the young were over. The galaxy would be governed by cooperation, not domination. Samuel stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the surrender documents being signed. He felt no satisfaction. He felt no triumph. He felt only the cold weight of duty fulfilled. Grace and were still dead. No amount of victory could bring them back. But their deaths had not been in vain. The galaxy would remember what happened when you betrayed humanity. The lesson had been taught in fire and blood and broken empires. The Baba had done his work. Now it was time to go home. Earth had never looked more beautiful. Samuel Price stood on the observation deck of the carrier Grace Holland, watching his turn slowly in the darkness below. The blue of the oceans, the green of the continents, the white swirls of clouds that drifted across the surface like dreams made visible. He had seen many worlds during the campaign. None of them compared to this. 6 months had passed since the executions at the council chamber. 6 months of war, of judgment, of teaching the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. Now the fighting was over. The treaties were signed. The new order was taking shape. The Galactic Council still existed, but it was not the same institution that had murdered 3 human officers under a flag of truce. The 12 ruling powers had been stripped of their special status. The new assembly gave every species an equal voice, from the oldest civilizations to the youngest. Decisions would be made through debate and compromise, not through threats and manipulation. Humanity had not asked for leadership of this new order. They had demanded only justice. When justice was served, they had stepped back and allowed the galaxy to govern itself. Some said this was wisdom. Others said it was foolishness. Samuel did not care what they said. He knew the truth. Humanity had never wanted an empire. They had wanted only to be left alone, to build their colonies and raise their children and explore the endless wonders of the universe. The council had forced them to become conquerors. Now that the threat was over, they could return to being explorers. The door to the observation deck opened, and Captain Diana Marsh walked in. She had commanded the Ghost Fleet throughout the campaign, carrying out Samuel's orders with skill and precision. She was a hero now, though she never used the word herself. "Colonel," she stood beside him at the window, "the council has formally apologized for the executions. They are offering reparations." "I know. The families of the 3 generals have been consulted. They want you to accept on their behalf." Samuel nodded slowly. Grace's mother had sent him a message last week, thanking him for what he had done. His husband had named his newborn daughter after Samuel. Brother had traveled across the country just to shake his hand. They were grateful. He understood that. But gratitude felt hollow when the people he had fought for were still dead. "Then we accept," he said, "but we do not forget." "Never." Diana paused, then asked the question that everyone in the fleet had been wondering. "What now, Colonel? You could have anything you want. Command of the entire defense force, a seat on the new assembly, the presidency itself if you asked for it." Samuel watched Earth for a long moment. He thought about his house in Montana, about the garden that had been untended for 6 months, about the tomatoes that had probably rotted on the vine. "I think I will go back to my garden," he said finally. "The vegetables need attention." Diana stared at him. "After everything you have done, you want to go back to farming." "I was never supposed to be a weapon, Captain. None of us were." He turned from the window and met her eyes. "We became what we needed to become because the universe demanded it, but the goal was never conquest. The goal was never glory. The goal was simply to make the universe safe enough that we could go back to living." Diana was quiet for a moment. "And if someone threatens humanity again, if another council decides to test us?" Samuel smiled, and for the first time in 6 months there was warmth in it. "The Baba can rest now. But if anyone makes it necessary, if anyone forgets the lesson we taught them here, they know where to find me." He walked toward the door, pausing at the threshold to look back at the view of Earth one more time. "The galaxy is watching us, Captain. They want to see what kind of species we really are. Are we conquerors who will rule through fear, or are we something else? Something better?" He shook his head. "I choose to be something better. I choose to plant tomatoes and watch the sunset and remember the friends I lost. That is the humanity I fought for. That is the humanity worth protecting." He left the observation deck and did not look back. 2 weeks later, Samuel Price returned to Montana. His house was dusty, his garden was overgrown, and his neighbors were surprised to see him. The news had been full of stories about the human campaign against the council. Colonel Samuel Price had been mentioned in some of those stories, though the details of his role remained classified. He did not explain anything to his neighbors. He simply went back to work in his garden, pulling weeds and planting seeds, and doing the slow, patient labor that had always brought him peace. 6 months after that, a diplomatic vessel arrived at Earth. They brought gifts and apologies and carefully worded treaties. The new government wanted to establish friendly relations with humanity. They wanted to show that the old regime was truly gone, that a new era had begun. Their ambassador asked to meet Colonel Samuel Price. She had heard stories about the human who had brought down the 12 ruling powers. She wanted to see him for herself, to understand what kind of being could inspire such fear across the galaxy. She was told that Colonel Price was unavailable. In Montana, Samuel looked up from his tomato plants as a shuttle passed overhead, carrying the ambassador to a meeting in the capital. He watched it for a moment, a small silver shape against the blue sky, then returned to his work. The soil was warm under his hands. The sun was gentle on his face. The mountains stood eternal in the distance, unchanged by wars or treaties or the rise and fall of civilizations. He was home. Years passed. The galaxy continued to turn. The new council grew stronger, more unified, more just. Species that had been enemies learned to work together. Trade routes opened. Knowledge was shared. The old wounds began to heal. Humanity took its place among the stars, not as conquerors but as partners. They built colonies on 100 worlds. They explored regions of space that no one had ever seen. They made friends with species that had once feared them. And in Montana, an old man with white hair continued to tend his garden. He grew older. His hands grew shakier. His limp grew worse. But every morning he walked outside and breathed the clean air and looked at the mountains and remembered. He remembered Grace, brilliant and brave, who had died trying to keep the peace. He remembered, whose tactical mind had been silenced before its time. He remembered, who had saved his life and deserved better than a plasma bolt in a foreign chamber. He remembered them. He would always remember them. And sometimes, late at night, when the stars were bright and the silence was complete, he would walk outside and look up at the sky. Out there, somewhere, the species he had humbled were rebuilding. The council he had shattered was reforming. The galaxy he had terrified was learning to hope again. They had learned their lesson. They would not forget. But if they ever did, if they ever looked at humanity and saw weakness instead of strength, mercy instead of power, peace instead of capability, they would remember one thing. The Baba was still out there, planting tomatoes, watching the sunset, waiting. And that was enough to keep the darkness at bay. Some monsters, it turned out, preferred to tend gardens. And the galaxy slept better knowing that if they ever needed to wake, they would.